Damit heißt ja Wendel. Ma Oscar Sax, Scale, Französ, Hispania, Italia, Agamita Estiken, Balon Andex, Nun Tadmatus. Sorry, my Estonian is not all that good. Head Peve Taylor. Now I can get back to English. So that was Ramsay McGee, and one little item I should mention, that his presentation proved my point that Freemasonry was originally established by Masonic regalia manufacturers. They are the only people ever to have profited from Freemasonry. Now, I have been given an important task today, and late after midnight last night, I decided to put my papers into some sort of order. This morning, I was hijacked at breakfast, and I didn't put them in the right order. So now, I will throw those out and start with this selection. Okay, so where's that little machine? There it is. So there you have the title of what I've been, of the conference today. And the next slide, I think, no, go one back. It's quite gentle. Right, that's the task that I have been given. I knew I was going to be welcome and that the Estonian element was early in my mind, because on the radio on the morning 3 days ago, your Estonian composer, Ester Magi, some of her music was being played on Radio 3 in England. And I thought that's a good augury. I also ought to mention that I have given several papers before, but never to an audience like this, let alone one where there is someone who used to look after Scottish Freemasonry, but also, as one of the speakers, one of the examiners of my doctorate. So, you see before you a case of mistaken identity. When I was with some of your senior members of the Grand Lodge of Estonia last year, at the meeting of another order in Edinburgh, they mistook me for the representative of the United Grand Lodge of England who attended the consecration of the Estonian Grand Lodge on the 18th of May 1999, and they subsequently invited me to speak today. But I wasn't present in 1999. It was not me. At that time, I'd only just taken over as the secretary of the United Grand Lodge of England, which in those days only had about 1,800 lodges in London alone. And so it was the president of our Board of General Purposes, very virtual brother, Gavin Purser, who came here 25 years ago, and you'll see him sitting next to your first Grand Master. I'm sorry if it's not very clear. I still have the press cutting in one of my files, and that was the best I could do with my camera. Luckily for me, even when I had diplomatically pointed out the mistaken identity, they still invited me to address you at this august occasion to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Grand Lodge of Estonia, and I'm pleased and honoured to be here today. So the tasks our hosts have set me are to provide insights from the perspective of the United Grand Lodge of England on the times when many Grand Lodges, including the Grand Lodge of Estonia, were established, to help the conference explore how the values and principles of the old charges and constitutions have maintained their significance over time, and to establish a connection between the old charges and constitutions and the development of the Grand Lodge of Estonia. Now, I hope you don't mind seeing all these words up on the text, but I may be speaking rather quickly, and I think this may help some of you follow what I am saying. I can, of course, obviously do the whole thing from heart, but I've forgotten it. So, this is what I shall be talking about today. You may well ask, as I asked myself, why me anyway? After all, I was initiated in the Apollo University Lodge, Oxford, as long ago as 1961, and I'm now just an 82-year-old former Grand Secretary and one of the past Senior Grand Wardens of the Grand Lodge. However, on my Masonic journey, I also joined what is now called the Royal Somerset and Inverness Lodge No. 4, one of the 4 old lodges which founded the Premier Grand Lodge in 1717, and of which the author of the 1723 constitutions, Dr. James Anderson, was a member. I was also the 17th Grand Secretary since 1717, and I was in that office in 1989 when the Grand Lodge of Estonia was founded and when it was recognised by the UGLE, United Grand Lodge of England, in the year 2000. Before that appointment, I'd been the Grand Secretary General of the Supreme Council of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite for England and Wales. A past Master of Quattro Coronati Research Lodge and a Fellow of the Royal Society Historical, I'm still a member of the External Relations Committee of our Board of General Purposes. I've written many papers about the UGLE's relations with its lodges overseas and with other Grand Lodges, and I have a doctorate based on my research into English Freemasonry in the British Empire in the latter half of the 19th century. I even have a facsimile edition of Anderson's 1723 constitutions. But I'm not an expert on its social and international importance. For that, you will have to refer to my Quattro Coronati colleagues, Dr. Rick Berman and Andres Onnefoss. However, I can speak about the continuing relevance of the old charges and constitutions today from an English perspective. Not too sure which way that's going, so either very sensitive or not. I now talk about the continuing relevance of the old charges and constitutions today. Even when the Scottish Freemason James Anderson published the so-called Old Charges in 1723, several of them were not appropriate to non-operative or speculative Freemasonry as practiced south of the border in England. For Anderson's version was his digestion of old charges that had been applied to operative stonemasons in previous centuries. Anderson claimed that his constitutions comprised the
Which one do you want?
I want the one starting with the word history. Gosh. Yep. Sorry, I'm not used to this particular handset, and I need to go right back. Are you controlling this or am I?
He probably has taken over.
Because it's not working on you. I don't know why. Oh no, it's working. Because before it was working.
It's certainly not working for me.
Se ei töötä. Ei sitä kyllä tai.
It's dead.
Suunnakset ja vales suunnakset.
Actually, you should pointing it towards more this way,
Ah,
not there. Like more.
There's a PC here on this table, on this chair.
right.
Yeah, now it works.
That's better. Which contains the history, laws, charges, orders, regulations and usages of the Right Worshipful Fraternity of ancient free and accepted Masons collected from their general records and their faithful traditions of many ages. He also stipulated in those constitutions that the master and wardens were to read all 48 pages of it at the admission of a new brother. It's unlikely that they, as published, were ever thereafter inflicted in full on any English candidate after his initiation. Moreover, some of the charges were irrelevant. For example, one requires that no master should take an apprentice unless he has sufficient employment for him. Second, it includes the injunction that all masons employed shall meekly receive their wages without murmuring or mutiny, and not desert the master till the work is finished. Well, I was one of those employees, and I have meekly received my wages until 25 years ago. However, in spite of all the criticism to which he, Anderson, and his book have been subjected, the remarkable influence of his constitutions on the course of world history must be freely acknowledged, as must the part it played in transmitting the principles and tenets of Freemasonry throughout the world. True to the ideals of the Enlightenment, those principles and tenets included religious tolerance, meritocracy, high standards of interpersonal civility, scientific and artistic education, and societal and personal self-improvement. Indeed, the importance of Anderson's 1723 work was most significantly recognised during the tercentennial celebrations in many jurisdictions just a year ago. Anderson himself amended, let's see if this works this time. Whoa. We're getting there. That's quite good. And the next one?
We're getting there.
And the next one?
Wait.
And the next one? Good. The charge. Whoops, back. Okay. So Anderson himself amended his version of the charges in later editions, and further changes were made to them over the next centuries. Today, under the English Constitution, that is the laws of the United Grand Lodge of England, a summary of the ancient charges and regulations is printed in the opening pages of our Book of Constitutions. Next one, please.
No, pane.
Next. Whoa, right. So, and at the opening of the lodge, to install a new master, the master is asked, do you admit to and promise to support these charges and regulations as masters have done in all ages? So I'm going to read these to you simply because it's part of our ritual. You agree to be a good man and true and strictly to observe the moral law. You're to be a peaceable subject and cheerfully to conform to the laws of the country in which you reside. You promise not to be involved in any plots or conspiracies against government, but patiently to submit to the decisions of the Supreme Legislature. Next. Oh, good. You agree to pay proper respect to the civil magistrate, to work diligently, live creditably, and act honourably by all men. You agree to hold in veneration the original rulers and patrons of the Order of Freemasonry, and their regular successors, supreme and subordinate, according to their stations, and to submit to the awards and resolutions of your brethren in general lodge convened, in every case consistent with the constitutions of the order. You agree to avoid private piques and quarrels, and to guard against intemperance and excess. You agree to be cautious in your carriage and behaviour, courteous to your brethren, faithful to your lodge. You promise to respect genuine and true brethren, and to discountenance impostors and all dissenters from the original plan of Freemasonry. You agree to promote the general good of society, to cultivate the social virtues, and to propagate the knowledge of the mystic art as far as your influence and ability can extend. Next. You promise to obey to pay homage to the Grand Master for the time being, and to his officers, when duly installed, and strictly to conform to every edict of the Grand Lodge. You admit that it's not in the power of any man or body of men to make any alteration or innovation in the body of masonry without consent first obtained of the Grand Lodge. You promise a regular attendance on communications and committees of the Grand Lodge, upon receiving proper notice thereof, and to pay attention to all the duties of Freemasonry on proper and convenient occasions. You admit that no new lodge can be formed without permission of the Grand Master or his deputy, and that no countenance ought to be given to any irregular lodge, or to any person initiated therein, and that no public processions of Masons clothed with the badges of the order can take place without the special licence of the Grand Master or his deputy. And finally, you admit that no person can regularly be made a Freemason or admitted a member of any lodge without previous notice and due inquiry into his character, and that no brother can be advanced to a higher degree except in strict conformity with the laws of the Grand Lodge. You promise that no visitor shall be received into your lodge without due examination and producing proper vouchers of his having been initiated in a regular lodge. So that's what every new master of a lodge has to agree to. Further echoes of Anderson's major work are also still to be found in the charge after initiation. So this is what is read to every new brother, which was recited to each newly made Freemason, and include, these are extracts from the ritual. The next one, please. That's it. So, the important duties you owe to God, to your neighbour and to yourself. God here is undefined. To be exemplary in the discharge of your civil duties. The practice of every domestic as well as public virtue. To maintain benevolence and charity, secrecy, fidelity and obedience, and to dedicate yourself to such pursuits as may at once enable you to be responsible in life, useful to mankind, and an ornament to the society of which you have this day become members. So that is what we tell each newly made brother on the night of his initiation. So you'll see that it mentions God, religion, civil magistrate, masters, wardens, management, craft, and so on. And now, less frequently heard or read today are the charges of a Freemason, which can be found without explanation or introduction in a much later section of our Book of Constitutions, and which bears a close resemblance to Anderson's early versions. And they too cover God and religion, the civil magistrate, masters, wardens, management, and behaviour. So there is the proof, if proof is needed, that the old charges and constitutions, lightly edited over the centuries, are still relevant to English Freemasonry today. So, I will now move on. Happily for us here today, the Grand Lodge of Estonia almost immediately was recognised as the United Grand Lodge of England after its creation in 1999 for three reasons, which I will come on to. Excuse me. This is the problem of doing homework late at night and proving that even Grand Secretaries are human beings. If anyone's interested in the page I'm looking for, it's number 14. It seems to have slipped somewhere along the line. Okay. Moving on. So, we now have the foundation of regular Freemasonry and what we consider to be the absolute basis of our tenets and principles. Over the next few years, the Grand Lodge of England and further later on Ireland and Scotland formed lodges overseas, and life became rather more complicated. They originally recognised each other in an informal way and allowed their members to visit. And a few European Grand Lodges, Denmark, Sweden, quickly followed their example, and these in their turn were recognised for intervisitation, so that we could share each other's enjoyment of regular Freemasonry. In the 19th century, however, Masonic interjurisdictional relations became more complicated. In 1855, the British Brethren, who formed the first Grand Lodge to be created in what remained of British North America, i.e. Canada, were initially called rebels, and their creation was deemed to have been irregular. It took the Grand Lodge of England 3 years to remove its ban on Masonic intercourse with this, the first Grand Lodge to have been created in the British Empire since the American War of Independence. But speculative Freemasonry, in its several forms, was already spreading over and ever more widely around the world. Unfortunately, some Grand Lodges became politically engaged and or stopped demanding of their initiates a belief in the Supreme Being, and so, at the end of the First World War, the Grand Master of the UGLE expressed a desire that the Board, of general purposes, would draw up a statement of the basic principles on which this Grand Lodge could be invited to recognise any Grand Lodge applying for its recognition. The Board's draft of those basic principles of Freemasonry, for which the Grand Lodge of England has stood through its history, was accepted by the Grand Lodge in September 1924, and these have been printed in its Book of Constitutions and applied ever since. We can move on from that. So, these are the basic principles for Grand Lodge recognition. Regularity of origin. That is, each lodge shall have been established lawfully by a duly recognised Grand Lodge or by 3 or more regularly constituted lodges. Belief in the Grand Architect of the universe and his revealed will shall be an essential qualification for membership. That all initiates shall take their obligation on or in full view of the open volume of the sacred law, by which is meant the revelation from above which is binding on the conscience of that particular individual who is being initiated. That the membership of the Grand Lodge and individual lodges shall be composed exclusively of those who were made Masons as men, and that each Grand Lodge shall have no Masonic association of any kind with bodies which make women Freemasons. That the Grand Lodge shall have sovereign jurisdiction with the lodges under its control, i.e., it shall be a responsible, independent, self-governing organisation with sole and undisputed authority over the craft or symbolic degrees, entered apprentice, fellow craft, master mason, within its jurisdiction, and shall not in any way be subjected to or divide such authority with a supreme council or other power claiming any control or supervision over those degrees. That the 3 great lights of Freemasonry, namely the volume of the sacred law, square, and the compasses, shall always be exhibited when the Grand Lodge or its subordinate lodges are at work, chief of those being the volume of the sacred law. And if, like me, you did a lot of your Freemasonry in Sri Lanka, there would be 5 different volumes of the sacred law available. That the discussion of religion and politics within the lodge shall be strictly prohibited, and that the principles of the ancient landmarks, customs and usages of the craft shall be strictly observed. Now, you'll note that these basic principles do not mention Anderson's constitutions. The numbers 2, about the Grand Architect, 4 and 7, no discussion of religion or politics, are consistent with Anderson's, and that number 8, ancient but undefined landmarks, is intended to cover everything else. Happily for us here today, Estonia met that challenge. The number of Grand Lodges has expanded hugely over this period and continues to do so, as I will show you with a graph in a moment. Grand Lodge was recognised by the UGLE after its creation for three reasons. It was created by the regular Grand Lodge of Finland. The Finnish Grand Lodge had been created by the Grand Lodge of New York in 1924, and that Grand Lodge had been an English provincial Grand Lodge until 1781, when it simply changed the name to become a Grand Lodge. So much for the genealogy of the Grand Lodge of Estonia and the conditions on which it has been internationally recognised by other regular Grand Lodges. So let me now review the context in which it was created from an English perspective. The historical context that led to the formation of the Grand Lodge of Estonia. I was impressed to learn that for 12 months from October 2020, the History Museum of Estonia held an exhibition entitled 250 Years of Freemasonry in Estonia. Brethren, we don't have time today for me to take us back to 1770, so I will just sketch the craft's international growth since the end of the First World War. Between 1918 and the outbreak of the Second World War, another 23 Grand Lodges were created. There were about 94 which we recognised in 1967, which was the 250th anniversary of the Grand Lodge of England, when the Duke of Kent, our Grand Master then, and still today, said we had little responsibility for the creation of most of them, but they all followed the tenets and principles laid down originally in Anderson's constitutions and revised over the years. As he said, the UGLE played a significant part in only a few of these, but the majority sought and eventually received its recognition. In Europe, some of that growth resulted in part from the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, which was built in 1961 when I was at university, and the dissolution of Soviet Russia in December 1991. These momentous events prompted and enabled the formation or re-establishment of Grand Lodges in territories in which it had, until then, been banned. Among the 84 Grand Lodges represented in at our 275th anniversary, 2 Grand Masters from Grand Lodges in recently independent countries in Eastern Europe were particularly welcomed by His Royal Highness, namely Brother Silaba, the first Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Czechoslovakia, and Brother Ferenc of the symbolic Grand Lodge of Hungary. Brother Ferenc, who was called upon to represent the Grand Lodges in the Old World, replied to his welcome, but especially warm applause greeted the 90-year-old Professor Yuri Silaba, who had survived many years in prison during and after the Second World War. I was present as a junior Grand Lodge officer and remember all this very well. Estonia was not represented, as its Grand Lodge had yet to be created. However, also present in 1992 was the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Finland, Brother Peltonen. His Grand Lodge had been initiating Estonians in its lodges since Finland, together with Latvia and Lithuania, finally achieved or re-achieved independence in 1991. Whereupon Finland promptly established 4 lodges in Estonia itself. It subsequently formed these 4 lodges into its district of Estonia in preparation for the eventual establishment of the Grand Lodge of Estonia in 1999. Lithuania and Latvia soon followed in 2002 and 2003 respectively. Meanwhile, a dozen more Grand Lodges have been established elsewhere, including Russia in 1995. The remarkable growth in the number of regular Grand Lodges established in the 21st century is shown in this graph. As you see, the growth is indeed truly remarkable. Several reasons account for that growth. The end of the Cold War, my Grand Lodge's decision to recognise with the permission of the previously recognised sovereign Grand Lodges in Brazil and Mexico, multiple Grand Lodges in those territories, and the Masonic independence of several British districts and inspectorates overseas, such as Malta, Cyprus, Ghana, and Nigeria. Most of the work of the Grand Chancellor's Department in London is concerned at the moment with checking that each new applicant Grand Lodge, particularly from South America and Central America, meets the tenets and principles laid down by Anderson and later adjustments to the qualifications required by the Grand Lodge of England for recognition. And at present we recognise a very large number. I think we're up to about 230. So we now come to a conclusion. That then is a summary of the context in which the Grand Lodge of Estonia was established in 1999 from an English perspective. While the number of English lodges has fallen from 8,500 in 1992 to 7,000 today, and the number of members has fallen from 340,000 to 169,000 today, the number of regular Grand Lodges around the world, recognised as such by the UGLE, is higher than it has ever been, namely 235, all of whose roots, principles and tenets can be traced back to 1717 and 1723. So, next image please. Let us then celebrate the continuing history of regular Freemasonry by singing a song which Anderson published in his 1723 constitutions, namely the Entered Apprentices Song.